next speaker is the Honorable Eugene R. Sullivan. Judge Sullivan is a former Chief Judge of the United States Court of Appeals for the Armed Forces. He was nominated to the court during the administration of President Ronald Reagan. President George H.W. Bush named him the Chief Judge in 1990. He was elevated to a senior status federal judge in 2002. Judge Sullivan has been inducted into the U.S. Army Ranger Hall of Fame. He has also served in the Pentagon as the General Counsel and the Chief Ethics Officer of the U.S. Air Force. Please join me in welcoming Judge Sullivan.
Thank you. Well, it's indeed a pleasure to be here. My law partner, Judge Free, suggested that I come here, and I'm pleased to be here in support of such a worthy cause. People have been talking about Camp Ashraf from different views: political, diplomatic, intelligence, legal, humanitarian. As a retired judge, I think this morning I'd like to share my thoughts about the ethical view here, and remembering that the law is based at the very bottom, at the foundation of all laws, is based on ethical behavior between human beings. And Harry Truman said there's nothing new except history we haven't learned. And I went back and I saw a similar ethical situation that occurred during America's Civil War. And it was at the very end. It was an ethical situation which I think we can apply today. And it happened at Appomattox Courthouse when the head of the Union Army, General Grant, met with Robert E. Lee, the Confederate, the rebel commander of the Army of the Northern Virginia, at a small house right next to Appomattox Courthouse. And as the two West Pointers sat across the table, a small table from each other, they discussed the terms of surrender. And one of the terms, by the way, Grant wrote out the surrender terms right in front of General Lee. And one of the terms I think is poignant. It says, the last sentence, he said, once the arms of the Confederate Army are turned over, that the men will be on parole and they can go to their homes. And it says, this done, quote, each officer and man will be allowed to return to their homes, not to be disturbed by the United States authority, so long as they observe their paroles and the laws in force where they reside. Now, those sentences at that time meant really an amazing thing, that these rebels, the Confederates, were not going to be subject to treason trials. Really, that's the bottom line of it, which was something that General Grant signed. He had discussed this with President Lincoln, and when he gave that term over, General Lee read it, and at the end he said, he nodded and he says, this will have a very happy effect on my army. And they concluded that, and that was in April. Unfortunately, later in April, President Lincoln was, as you know, was shot and killed, and Vice President Johnson took control of the United States government as the commander-in-chief. Grant was still the head of the Army, the Union Army, and he was respected in the South, loved by the North. He was the most popular man. If they had a Time magazine, he would have been on the cover. But he was anyway, in June, Grant gets word that President, his commander-in-chief, Johnson, had ordered treason trials for Lee, General Longstreet, and 10 other Confederate generals. A federal judge down in Richmond, pursuant to the president, had issued these indictments. Well, Grant went to the White House and he said, "Mr. President, I gave my word." The president probably said, "General, you work for me. I'm the commander-in-chief. You're a general. You gave the document, but that document doesn't mean anything to me because I'm the president, and I can do what I want." And again, Grant said, "I gave my word. I gave the word of my nation." And and then he stopped, and you could see that it unmoved the president. And then Grant said this. Now, we do have a copy of what he said. He said, "Mr. President, I will resign the command of the Army rather than execute any order to arrest Lee or any of his commanders so long as they obey the law." And Johnson, who was a stubborn man, but a practical man, he knew he was going to have to be reelected president to continue on, and he was looking across the room at the most popular man, the Time magazine Man of the Year, and who could get the nomination not just of the Republican Party, but the Democratic Party and any other party, and win. And so he thought for a while, and he says, "Very well, I will reconsider." And within 2 days, the indictments were withdrawn. Now, I tell you that story. Can we put up on the screen that audio visual? This is an ID card of a man I understand has been killed. And this is the signature and the agreement that he, and let me walk over here. He signed, and the U.S. Iraq representative, Commander, United States Navy, an officer in the United States Armed Forces, signed on behalf of our nation. And it said that more or less, just like that phrase that I read to you, that this is a protection. I will protect you. And this is not just a protection from treason trial, like in the Civil War, but this is protection of life. Protect your life. My law partner is Judge Free. We have a small law firm here in New York, and he said, what we're really doing, America is giving a license to kill the residents of Camp Ashraf. And he said this in a recent op-ed I'm sure you all have read. Now, Grant gave his word to protect all the Confederate soldiers as an officer, but it was the word of the nation. And Ashraf, our officers and our country gave its word to the residents of that camp.